Eddie studied graphic design at the London College of Printing and Yale University, where he received his MFA in 1997. He began his career as a designer at ATG and Imaginary Forces and worked as an art director at 2x4 before establishing his own studio, the Map Office, in 2005. Opara and the Map Office team joined Pentagram's New York office in 2010. Eddie is a multifaceted designer whose work encompasses strategy, design, and technology. His projects have included the design of brand identity, publications, packaging, environments, exhibitions, interactive installations, websites, user interfaces, and software, with many of his projects ranging across multiple media. His clients have included the Menil Foundation, the Studio Museum in Harlem, Jazz at Lincoln Center, the Queens Museum of Art, Vitra, Prada, St. Regis Hotel, Morgan Stanley, New York University, Grimshaw Architects, and Princeton Architectural Press. He was named one of Fast Company's 100 most creative people in business and was featured in Ebony Magazine's Power 100 list. We're very honored to welcome Mr. Eddie Opara.
So it's working? All right. Hi, everybody. Hi, Montreal. Thanks for having me. Let's see, how do we do this? Pentagram, right. It's one of those things, isn't it? How to explain us. Well, Pentagram is exactly my age. I'm 42 years old, so I'm a Pentagram baby, as it were. Right now there are 19 of us, and the way that we're set up is quite peculiar. We may be seen as the originators of the multidisciplinary design culture. We see ourselves in a certain sense as a dysfunctional family. The whole idea here is that we all have an equal profit and loss structure. So if somebody is, let's say, not doing so well, it's equated. Talking about that sort of, equilibrium, there is another fascinating thing about us, and maybe I will have certain partners say, no, that's not fucking right, Eddie, damn it. And it's really more about the factor of philosophy, that I don't believe that we have one, due to the fact that every single partner at Pentagram is seen as quite prominent in their area. And so, certain areas such as graphic design, architecture, industrial design, and digital design, they have their own types of idea. So in a sense, when we're writing a particular draft towards an RFP, what basically occurs is if we all wrote to the same company, it would be entirely different. And that's bizarre. That means that we really don't have one centralized philosophy. And I believe that to be the case in point. The idea of collaboration is that you should not be the mirror image of the other person standing right next to you, literally. It just doesn't work. If I saw myself, I'd be like, oh my God, oh God, I've got to get out of here. And so that is an important factor for the way that we bond together, work together, and then try and achieve our particular goals. So, we are seen as the largest independent design company in the world. We don't see ourselves as a design agency as such. But the reason why I'm here is to talk a little bit about what is known as ideation, but I'm like, I have no idea. And it's really ideation is the formulation of like ideas and concepts. That's pretty much the factor behind it. But I'm really here to talk about maybe 2, potentially 3, maybe 4 projects. Depends upon the time. The first set of projects is going to be talking about social networking. Actually, that's sort of the main area, and sort of social, cultural conditions, and how that actually sort of works with the idea of creating ideas. But I wanted to start with this particular typeface. And just recently, this was developed for a client of ours, which we're moving ahead for their launch in December 14th. It's the Cooper Hewitt. It's the national, it's actually the Smithsonian Design Museum. It used to be called the National Design Museum in the United States. And the funny thing about this particular font is that it really came out of a meeting with every single board member that came over to Pentagram from different parts of the country. And one of the brilliant things that the Cooper did is get all the stakeholders in one space, in the room together, talking about the concepts that we had come up with. Now, you know how hard that is to get these pretty prominent people. We had like executives, CTO, I think CMO of GE there, and they're very sort of prominent personalities. And it allowed us to start to formulate exactly what was going on. And the way what we do it is that we wait for the first argument. We don't do the sticky thing. We don't do the writing on the board. We don't do any of that. We look at the first argument between people. So the factors of, you could call it constructive conversation, but it's really an argument between two stakeholders. And in a sense, what's occurring is a sort of polarity of concept. And in this particular regard, we're trying to develop a particular construct, a particular design, you could say methodology behind this. We don't utilize the term strategy so much. It's really design-led. And what really occurs is that you're sort of behind the scenes really configuring that particular approach in regards to what the limitations are actually occurring between those two or multiple issues within that particular room at that time, what they're actually looking at and what they're sort of engaging in. And that's a very sort of important factor for us. And what basically occurred here is that we eventually developed the factors of this particular font out of that process. But another aspect came about, and it's really the factor of openness, that the Cooper Hewitt, as it is known, is a federal institution. It is open to the public, to the American people. And that is an important factor. And what basically occurred was that we developed a particular typeface together with the Cooper Hewitt that can be not only is number one is an enormous family of weights and of structure. Normally this type of font would probably take about approximately a year to maybe a year and a half to develop. It actually took 6 months with Chester Jenkins, who is a Canadian, just to let you know, woohoo, right? And another thing that we did was generate a process where you can download it for free on the Cooper Hewitt site. So you can do it right now. But not only that, it's a digital construct. You can utilize it. It's a web font. It's a print font, and you have the ability to actually just modify it to fuck. It's just like, do whatever you want to do with it. Now that open structure allows you to create a sort of neutral construct of being. So in a sense, there's no subjectivity whatsoever. It is so neutral that the idea is that it's incredibly open and you can manipulate it the way you want. So the process here is really the king. So anyway, back to this. Creating a social network ain't easy. It ain't it's not fucking easy. I got a telephone call one day at the office, and it was a lady who wanted us, was interested in us hiring us to develop a application that was all about voting or the ideas of opinions. And she had found out about me in regards to my my interests and understanding of information design and data visualization. And also I do code. And it was quite an interesting conversation. She came in and we sort of took this further. The client is called Blotboard, and this has been a sort of 2.5-year process to get this up and running on the web and into the internet. What I want to sort of talk about is partly the process of how we sort of came about this. The factor here is that who's developed a social network here? 1, 2, 3. It's hard, right? Very hard, right? So the whole idea is that it's not your standard website. It's not your standard application. You have to deal with the ability to understand different users, the idea that users are talking to other users, are following other users, who are following other users, who will follow other users, and so on and so forth. And that particular process is sort of bundled up in as a framework. But then above that framework is another structure where you have the ability to apply mini applications to that particular networking structure. Hence, like the ideas of Facebook and so on and so forth. But for us, there's this idea of, when we came to this particular project, is visualization of data a powerful mechanism for perception and persuasion for the public. We again had this major issue about who is it for? It's for people, it's just for people. Who are these people? It's fucking billions of people. So how the hell do you know what they want? That's a hard deal, right? And so you have to be, in a certain sense, incredibly simple and neutral as best as you can. But then you want to try, as a graphic designer or a UI designer, a UX designer, to a certain degree, sprinkle a little bit of pixie dust on top of that, make it really nice and groovy, right? And that's a really difficult thing to sort of achieve. We also think, could it be this, or could it be, or is it a visual labyrinth that Joe Public needs a PhD in statistics to mine through? And it's actually sort of both. It's really sort of like a tricky situation in regards to the sense of visualization. So the factor here is that Blotboard is not just what we call a voting tool. It's a visualization construct that sort of engages people to want to do more over the course of time. And so for designers, the outcome of data visualization is an analytical, or is it telling a story? Now, the thing about this is that we all know the whole idea about, you've been in a meeting, you're sitting down, and you're like, what am I going to tell this client? And you say, I'm going to tell you a story, right? And has anybody seen that video by Stefan Sassmeister about fuck storytelling? Yeah. You just fuck it. Just like throw it away. You're not that. You're not telling a story, damn it. We live in a postmodernist society that has multi-layered stories, whatever you want to call it, all over the place. They network all over the goddamn world. It's really incredibly difficult to tell a very clear, precise story to billions of people that are going to understand that. So what do you utilize? You utilize a structure that is a little bit more neutral. So you balance it with keep it simple, stupid, and complement complexity. And the factor here is that the complexity is there for a different type of user or personality. You have, for an application, you have a very simple sort of framework, and then you have something which is incredibly advanced. I mean, who knows the whole of Photoshop? Come on then, come. Oh, yeah, right. Yeah? Thought so. You just don't. You don't. Somebody might say they do, but the whole the whole idea here is that when building applications or modern designs, you build them in layers. You build them in layers of interpretation and understanding. So one layer is incredibly simple, then you have the intermediates, then you have the advanced, and then so on and so forth, because people are entirely different. And you've always got some guy that's going to go up to you and say, hey, did you check out that thing on your iPhone? And I'm like, what thing? That thing. I'm like, what the fuck is that? I thought I was really fucking good at this. And you just never know. So it's really important that there are these different layers of interpretation, but in a neutral structure. It's very, very difficult. So, what do you think about reimagining the way we decide about things? Has anybody did you wake up in the morning and actually ask yourself that? Yeah, sometimes, yeah. It's sort of important. And you definitely ask yourself this question, right? No? And so what's basically happening is that with Blockboard, we were trying to ask these questions. What decisions did you make today? The whole premise of Blockboard is to ask questions and make decisions. But they're from the idea of I just bought a Prada bag, or I'm about to buy this Prada bag, I'm going to tell my friends, I want everybody to know about it, but I'm not quite sure, what do you think? Or maybe it's this one, or maybe it's this one, oh my God, there's too many. So there's too many sort of decisions to make. Maybe I'm going to ask some friends to help me out. That's one way of thinking about it. Another way of thinking about it is the decision aspect of asking, the factors of should the US actually or Britain be bombing ISIS? Is there another solution behind this to deal with? Or how are we dealing with the Ebola virus in West Africa, and how the hell is it occurring in the US and now in Spain? So that's a political aspect to it. And then they could be cultural, religious aspects. So there's so many decisions that people make on a day-to-day basis that the way that we built this system, that has to be so open that anybody can actually enter in anything and other people decide what those answers are. Those answers could be tracked over the course of time by the other users. So for instance, if you were per se interested in regards to why a particular answer dipped, you can find out when it occurred, and maybe it's connected to the commentary that's actually occurring. So it's actually got transparent analytics, a measurement for you to actually look at. And that's a very sort of new thing in regards to the way that people see things. This is a crummy-looking logo. It's slightly crusty on the screen, but that's Blockboard. And this is what we call the blop itself. And it's basically a very simple portrait viewed design, the way it sort of works is it integrates into and it can be actually added or embedded into different areas like Facebook or Twitter or newspapers, online, that is, websites, blogs, you name it, it can actually be integrated into it. And as you can see, the central area is more in regards to it's sort of a tree map that decides that's where the opinions are actually occurring. This is a little video in regards to that sort of bag thing. Oh my God, I don't know which bag I want. And it basically shows you what's actually going on. It's actually, it's also real time, so you don't have to reload anything. It's always going on constantly. And then one thing that we wanted to do is measure, find a different way to visualize content. And that was a very tricky thing to do. This is quite abstract, to be honest. I'm so sorry, it has no context, but I'll explain it to you. We were trying very, very hard to create a visualizing system that looked at different countries and different states, and we're still doing that today for Blockboard. And one of the things that sort of came to mind was this system from Betin, which is a cartographic system. So you're not looking at the geography of where something's actually occurring, but you're just looking at the idea of volumetric scale. And what we would do is to zoom in, you would actually click on the actual state, find out what's going on, and then go into that if you needed to find out any more information. So in a way, that's a very sort of crude-esque sort of zoom-in process. Instead of being geographical, we utilized a cartographic system. And the cartogram system. And so one of the things that I always believe is that whenever you see the Google Maps being used and you see all those pins sticking out of places, you know, for visualizing information or identifying information, say, oh my God, that's a piece of shit. Because it actually is. It's not really determining anything for you, and it's very, very sort of messy. And so what we did is we sort of started to integrate it into the actual interface and made it actually work quite well. And then these are sort of roughs in regards to how it would work in the Explorer view, which is, I'll talk about that in a few minutes and how it actually sort of works. But this is Blockboard, by the way. And it's also on the phone. And so we just tried to make it as easy and quick as possible. And the process took a long, long time. The client got very, very angry at me and said, Eddie, why the fuck is it taking so long? I thought you did all those effing tests. And I said, those tests that we did didn't come out correct. They didn't work. The system didn't work. The first time we did it, it didn't work. And she said, why? I said, because we got it wrong. We got the design wrong. People didn't like it. And that sounds like my team actually laughing then. And what occurred is like, she said, I've got to go to market. I've really got to go to market with this thing. It's like, you can't go to market. I'm not going to allow you to go to market with this. No way. We're going to go back, we're going to do it again, and we're going to get it right. Because we listened to every user that wanted to utilize the system. And we built it and tried to run it, and it really didn't work correctly. And the funny thing is, nobody's ever done a system like this. That's the thing. It's like its own entity, which is surprising. I think this is the phone version. Now, it works now. We totally just ripped it apart, put it back together again, and it actually is it's like crack, actually, when you actually use it on the phone. I've actually heard people state that it's just like a constant sort of thing that's quite addictive. And it's also incredibly fun to utilize. This is actually it running on somebody's desktop. This is at the World Cup and everything. So the idea of putting in a question, this is when somebody actually puts in a question, standard sort of drag and drop, or select wherever you want to get on the web. Do the yes and no thing. You can actually add up to like 8 different potential answers, and then you put it into the system, and then, hey presto, it's there. It's gone to the actual system, and it's gone to the actual site. And this is it when you're testing it. So that's it being run live. And then this is Explorer. This is where you can actually look on the weekly categories and actually find out more information on what's actually sort of going on in regards to different places. And when you're going down, what Blockboard actually does, and it's incredibly clever, it's gone now, is it basically creates a percentile system. It looks at the percentages here and actually starts to write out sentence structures and statements for you automatically. So that's not people doing it, it's actually the system that's doing it. That's why it took a long time. I don't know if we're going to show the timeline on that. I think that's it. But, sort of to end the aspects of Blockboard, it had a successful launch. We're helping them deal with their 1.1. But the way that we basically construct our systems is that we want to make sure that people, when testing, are very, very clear in regards to whether it works or not. And we will go back and we will rip it apart and do it again. That is an important factor. The second is the creation of something else. Creating an experience about social creation and consumption with robots is not easy either. Now, this was an insane project, especially in 45 days. MIT came to us and asked us to help them. I was in town for another job, an identity job, and I walked over to Carlo Ratti's office in the architecture section department in MIT. And I asked him, "Hi, Carlo, how's it going?" He's like, "It's great. Can you help me?" And I said, "What do you want?" And he said, "I need your understanding in regards to visualization and of data, and you have 45 days, 30 days actually, the first one, and 15 days the second." And I was like, "Okay, what is it?" So, "Well, what we're doing is we're making robots make cocktails." And I was like, I kind of looked at one of my designers, I was like, "Oh, this is interesting, this is very intriguing. Okay, and so why do you need me?" And he said, "We need to visualize exactly what is going on in the process of how you build the drinks, how you come up with the ideas themselves of making these drinks." And that was part of it. And this is Carlo. He's a wonderful, incredibly intelligent madman, and with the ability of absolute genius. So the system was called Maker Shaker, and I didn't come up with that name, right? I didn't come up with any of these names. And it's really, as I stated, it's really about social creation and consumption. And what basically is happening is that MIT got some funding from certain large corporations to study the idea of human consumption of alcohol and other sort of drinks. And the whole idea is that everybody is creating different types of drinks, but can you put them together in a social gathering and fundamentally find out that they've created different drinks? And that's a pretty impressive thing. Instead of the idea of Coca-Cola or Bacardi, these are the two large companies doing this, making the drinks. People are going to do it for them. And I'm like, wow, that's genius. That's absolutely genius. This is the logo we did in about 5 minutes. It's all about the sense of design, the idea of making, and enjoying that aspect. And that's all part of the process. This is one part of the robot. It's one of the KUKA robots that actually make sort of cars and manufacturing. You've probably seen them around. And what we did is we said, yes, okay, we'll do it. And we basically started on a sprint in regards to developing it. And this is one of our, actually 2 options that we actually sort of came up with the idea of visualizing this information. And I'll explain a little further. The way that the user would actually make the drink is on the phone, and then it would actually be placed into a queuing system here. And you place your order through the phone via social network, thus as Facebook. You'd come up here with your actual Facebook image. That's why you never use Facebook. And then you go into the making process where all the robots are. And then you actually have the enjoy section in regards to the visualization of finding out whether or not somebody in Argentina has the same type of drink as you have in like Montreal. And this is the sort of user interface that we sort of generated. We wanted it to feel a little bit more robotic in a way, and electronic. And so this is how you would sort of add your sort of drinks. But the process was that we sort of mapped it out. We did all the standard, processes of the system architecture, mapping that structure out, trying to create the sort of foundational UX visuals, and it was quite successful. We didn't have to go back and do it again. So this is some of the screens. And then this is really sort of important. This is when we started to actually put the monitors at the back here. You're probably about this size to the robots. And we actually try to create a certain way of adding sort of ingredients to the actual iconography structure. And we looked at this multiple times. We talked to each other, trying to figure it out. Our clients didn't give a shit. I mean, they were basically knew that we were going to come up with something that was going to be interesting. And I always liked that. That's Erin. She's actually from Montreal. She used to be my project manager. She's great. More images. And then we always create animations, animatics, sort of roughs to determine exactly how the system's going to flow correctly, and how we're going to code it exactly right. This is all done eventually in, the coding was actually all done in JavaScript. Really weird. It's just the fastest way to do this. And also, by the way, the KUKA robots had never been talked to before by a smartphone at all. So that was an entirely different sort of integration of the database structure, was an entirely different system. It was really, really very, very tricky. So this is the whole system working at once. So we actually had to sort of build out how it would actually work and proceed. So after one person's gone, another person goes in, and the other robot starts adding one part of the ingredients, shows you the alcohol percentiles and the calories, and then the other one's adding a sort of pineapple juice, and then you get your drink over here, and then you actually see the sort of consumption visualization in the corner. So we had to show this in Milan Design Week, and that was the 30 days. It actually worked. These are the KUKA robots. There are 3 of them. I put 4 fingers up there. 3 of them. So the whole idea is the idea of actually moving quite fast is of importance to us as well. I love to move fast, and I love to move to the point of view of trying to come up with concepts that and maybe actually be beyond the client themselves, that fundamentally it's just like, I don't quite understand what you're doing or what you're trying to say here, but it's actually working. So this is in Milan, and this is Google I/O. So Google saw it, and they wanted it. So we had to take out all the Facebook stuff in 15 fucking days. And so this is it on the phone. This is at Google. And a lot of people waiting for their drinks. A lot of people. So we had to put it on the Nexus 7. You know, it's a nice piece, nice tablet, that. And so they had doyens like walking around, stewards walking around, actually adding people's drinks. In Italy, you actually had it on your phone, so you could just do it on your own. And so I'm going to show you a video. So I'm gonna stop, but there's one thing I want to sort of talk about sense of ideas. On those two projects, we came up with multiple concepts, and we believe that any of those concepts would have actually worked. Depending on how it would have sort of worked better for a particular user is something that we'll never know, and I don't think anybody can actually measure that, and we believe that to be a fact. But one thing that we truly believe in is the idea that you should never leave a concept that you've done eons ago alone. You should always bring it back into the fold, because you never know whether or not it's going to actually work. So thank you.